Hello everyone, welcome to my slightly wet garden in rural Herefordshire. I'm sorry about the mud. I've been out here planting. Today I planted some Bulgarian giant leeks out, and I've been planting out some borage and calendula and some other sort of border flowers. And some of the stuff that I've been planting recently, they've been eaten. Beetroots have been eaten. There's peas that I planted out about 2 days ago that have been eaten by rabbits. Now the thing is, we've never seen a rabbit for the whole time we lived here in the garden, but this year we found a nest of rabbits in the polytunnel, and suddenly there's just rabbits all the time. And I know the reason. It's because we're sort of letting bits go wild, and we're sort of inviting wildlife into our garden. And so it's this like tension, and it reminded me of the story by told by Duncan Williamson, the Scottish traveller, storyteller. And it's about two kings, the king of the east and the king of the west. And despite the fact that they have a border that joins their kingdoms together, they don't fall out, they don't fight, they never invade each other because they both love gardens. Now the king of the west and the king of the east have never visited each other's gardens, but they always hear rumours of how beautiful each other's gardens are. They love to spend time in their gardens. The king of the west, he loves nothing more than going into his garden. It's where he finds peace, it's where he finds joy. And he knows that his garden is the most beautiful garden in the world. And one day though, he was out in his garden and he was looking at it and he was thinking, this is so beautiful. There is no garden more beautiful than my garden in the whole world. And suddenly he got this pang of doubt. And he thought, well, what about the king of the east though? People are always saying how beautiful his garden is. What if his garden is more beautiful than my own? And he thinks, well, I've never accepted one of the invitations to the king of the east, but I need to go and check for myself. Put this matter to rest. So he called one of his messengers, he sent them all the way to the king of the east to accept one of the invitations he had recently. And the time came for him to go off. The queen was ill, so she had to stay behind. So the king got his entourage and he travelled from the west all the way over to the king of the east. It took a long time to get there. And when he got there, the king of the east welcomed him with open arms. And he threw this great big banquet that lasted for days and days. All the way through it, though, the king of the west was thinking, oh, come on, I just want to see that garden. I want to see that garden. But finally, after a few days, the time came and the king of the east walked to him and said, my friend, I want to come and show you my garden. I hear you like gardens just as much as I do. The king of the west said, I'd love to see your garden, but I have one request. Could I go and see it by myself, just to spend some time there? But he said, my friend, no worries, I know what you mean. Sure, you can go and enjoy it by yourself. So he showed the king of the west all the way to the garden. There was a great big ornate archway covered in beautiful roses. He had the door opened and the king of the west went in. As soon as he got in there, his heart dropped. So he looked around and the grass was perfectly manicured. There was beautiful roses unlike he'd ever seen, and they were pruned to perfection. The apple trees were all pruned. They looked like something out of a painting. The apples were so big and red. There wasn't a weed in sight. There was not even like there was no leaves on the ground. Everything was completely immaculate. He thought, this is more perfect than mine. I can't believe it. When he went back in, they continued with the proceedings, but when he left, he felt so downtrodden. When he got back home, his wife said, what's wrong? Why are you so upset? Did the king of the east do something? He said, it's true. His garden is more perfect than mine. Then his disappointment turned into anger because he thought about his royal garden. He said, this gardener has always said that he's doing everything he can to make my garden incredible, but he's lied to me. He's betrayed me. So he had him called in there. He accused him of treason and had him thrown into the dungeon. I'm going to deal with you later. He was going to have his head cut off. Over the next few days, the king had a change of heart because he thought about the head gardener. He thought, I've treated him as a friend. I've invited him round to dinner, and he's always as far as I know, tried to be honest with me. Maybe I need to give him a chance. So he called him up and he said, right, I'm going to give you one more chance to get it right. You need to make me the most perfect garden there ever was. And the gardener said, I can do it. Just lock up the gates. I'll be in there for a couple of weeks. I'll come out and you'll have what you want. So it was done. After a couple of weeks, the gardener came back and he said, it's ready. So the king went in there. He was really excited to see it. The gates were unlocked. He walked in, and as he looked around, he saw, completely immaculate garden. The grass was all trimmed to perfection. He too had the apple trees and the pear trees and the cherry trees. They'd all been pruned. They looked beautiful. Roses had been imported from far off lands, and they looked even more majestic than the one in the king of the East garden. There wasn't a fallen leaf or a blade of grass out of place. There were no weeds. But when the king of the West looked around, he saw all that perfection and he felt nothing. He felt numb. He called the gardener back and he said, why is this? Why do I feel this way? And the king of the West, the gardener, he said, I know why. I can help you. You just have to trust me. Lock this garden up again for a year and don't let anyone go in there. And the king decided to follow the advice. He had it locked up. He waited for a year, and it was really hard not to go in his garden. He loved the garden so much, but he waited, and finally the year ended. The royal garden called him up, summoned him up, not called him up on the phone, summoned him up. He had the gates unlocked for the first time in the year. They creaked open. When he walked in, he looked around. The grass was long. There was seed heads at the top. There was wildflowers growing in there, all different colours, types he'd never seen before. There were bees buzzing all around them. At the bottom of the hedges, which had been left to grow a bit, there was all leaves piled up, and he could see things moving in it. From the unruly apple tree with new shoots growing off it, there were birds in there singing. And as he looked around, he breathed in and he felt himself filling back up again. He felt the joy and the calm. He felt something again. He said to the gardener, why is this? He said, well, when you had me do it, it looked perfect. Everything was in its place. Everything was neat. Everything was under control. There was no space for any other life there. Everything was barren. There were no hedgehogs under the hedge like there are now. There were no birds singing in the trees. There were no bees buzzing around. There were no wasps. There were no insects. There were barely any earthworms. But now we've let it do what it needs to do. Life has come back in, and that is what you were feeling in your heart. And with that, the king smiled. And he knew it might not be perfectly immaculate, but he knew now that it was perfect and it was beautiful. Which brings me back to rabbits. So, just for anyone that does rewild, I do know that that story suggests you just shut the gate and let it all come back. It's not as easy as that, unfortunately, but let's not get into that. But we are rewilding the garden and the meadow next door. We're letting it go wild. We're letting things come back. We have found hedgehogs in here. We've seen frogs and we've seen toads. The bees are always buzzing around here. We get wasps' nests. There's life here. And with that, we've invited the rabbits into our garden. So I'm trying not to be all Mr McGregor about it. I'm trying not to see it as a battle between us and them, but recognising that we have actively invited them back in. So I'm trying to use this story and some others to sort of, realise that it's not a battle. The rabbits aren't battling us. The rabbits are just doing their thing and eating. And I have to accept some of it as a sacrifice to them. And also notice there is an ecosystem. I've also found some of the rabbits dead, ripped apart by cats and by red kite and by magpie. So the cycles of life are doing their thing. Anyway, there we go. Enjoy.